everyone. Welcome to the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you for joining us after a slight time change, but well worth it to have the chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense here, Congressman Ken Calvert of the 41st District of California. He's been a member of Congress for 32 years. He's one of the most senior members of Congress, and he's the current dean of the California Republican delegation. We're thrilled to have him, especially since, as we joked, there's not a lot going on in DC today for national security-minded members. He has less than zero time to give to AEI, and we're just truly thrilled that you came all the way across town to be with us on such a busy day. No more intros because you need none, and we want to get right to hearing your thoughts, some scene-setting remarks, and then we'll have a brief dialogue. Welcome, sir.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. I know a number of you here over the years, and I am blessed to I think, lead the most important committee in the House, because I remember going out to dinner one time with Jack Murtha, Jerry Lewis, and Bill Young, and we were somewhere, I think in Dubai or someplace, and Jack Murtha looked over at me and said, this is years ago, and said, Ken, if you ever become chairman of Defense Appropriations and they ask you to be the full committee chairman, you tell them to go to hell. And if any of you knew Jack Murtha, you know what I was talking about. And but I never told that to Tom Cole, so don't you tell him that either. But it's a privilege to have that job in a time in which a lot of change is going to take place. It must take place. You know, after the Cold War, our Department of Defense went into decline, basically, because we didn't think we had any adversaries per se, and Carter Ash had the famous dinner, the Last Supper, as they call it, and they said, look to your left, look to your right. And, three of you are not going to exist anymore. But I don't think he would have foreseen the collapse to the degree that it happened, to where we now have, Kevin, 6 prime contractors in the country. And that's not, and now the times have changed, and now we need more people in defense, small companies, innovators, that are disruptive and to bring change in as rapidly as possible, because we don't have time. Okay. China is on the march. They're acting very quickly. They don't have to worry about continuing resolutions. They don't have a Congress to have to deal with or a Senate. Xi just makes up his mind about what he wants to do that day and moves forward. And we're in a situation right now where with declining dollars, we're trying to do more with less, and things are expensive. And so we have this complicated situation, which I'm trying to change, and how we're going to change it. We're going to bring more innovation to the Department of Defense. As we have AppFit, we have DIU, which Doug Beck, I think, continues to do a good job. I hope they keep him on. Heidi Shue will be leaving the department, but she did a great job over at AppFit, and we created the Office of Strategic Capital, where we can leverage dual-use technologies, both on the commercial market and in the military market. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for entrepreneurs to now, who were reluctant before, to maybe look at the Department of Defense as a potential customer, and we want to do that. So just give you that remarks, and I want to just open to any questions you might have.
Good. Well, thank you so much. You've hit on all of the themes that we've been talking about here at AEI today in our own defense conference, and it's about spending the defense dollars we get better and smarter, and perhaps reconciling the strategy resource mismatch, which grows with each administration. The aspirations of what we want the armed forces to do and how much they're given to do it. So if you were to take a swing at getting to peace through strength, more like a Reagan-style effort, even if it's selectively building up, how do you begin? Where would you start?
Well, one, you should have a budget that reflects the threat. It's a basic premise of the department, and so that's not been reflected, obviously, in recent budgets. So what is that? And what's the challenges to get to where we need to be? One, mandatory spending, all of you know, is well over 75% of total outlay. So we're down to discretionary spending around 25%. When I came to Congress 32 years ago, discretionary spending was 75% of, or 70% of outlay, and non-discretionary was 30%. So you've had this growth in the mandatory side and decline in discretionary spending. If you take a look at discretionary spending overall, not just defense, but non-defense discretionary, it's relatively flat. And defense has actually come down. We're now at less than 3% of GDP on total outlay on defense. When Reagan was doing the buildup, we were at, what, 7% of GDP. So my friend Roger Wicker or Mike, would say we need to get up to 5% of GDP. Okay, now that's great. I'd like to see us get to 5% of GDP, but how do we do that? That's the question. And so there's things we can do within the department to save money, which is going to be, it's not going to just, the senior managers over there, and it's not going to roll over, but we need to take a look at the number of civilian employees we have relative to military folks. And the prior comptrollers have been looking at that over the years, and it's been an impossible mountain to climb, but we're going to have to climb it because we're going to have to bring down that relative number. If we brought it back to the historic norm, we would have about an excess of about $125 billion over 5 years that we can put back into procurement. But that's still not enough. We still need to do more in order to get more out of our department. And I'm not, I've been around long enough to know that that's not going to be simple. And we're going to have a strong administrator in the Department of Defense, and we're going to have coordination between the House and the Senate in order to do it. And some of that is going to have to make some decisions about the future of warfare, too, that I think we need to have a serious conversation about. I met with General Grange this morning. Those of you who are war historians, General Grange, I think, received, 4 Silver Stars in Vietnam and a couple of Purple Hearts and a couple of Bronze Stars. So he started, I think, the Delta Force. So he understands war. He's been to Ukraine 16 times just to study how they're operating. War has changed, and it has changed forever. Whether we like it or not, we have to deal with it. And the use of drone technology, autonomous aircraft and vehicles is now here, and is here forever.
I fully support you. Over the years, I've talked about some various bills you've introduced and your many efforts, repeated over decades actually, to try to stem even the rate of growth in the federal defense civilian workforce. And so keep charging at that windmill because it's important. Is it a union issue? Is it a veterans employment issue, which started under Obama to give veterans preference to this hiring? What is it, or how do you think you can begin
yes to all the above, yeah.
Okay.
It's all,
so how will your colleagues respond to this?
Yeah. Well, there's segments within the civilian workforce. When we talk about the Department of Defense, it's just not the Pentagon. It's, you got the CIA, you got the NSA, you have NRO, NGA. You have the entire defense enterprise, which is one of the largest enterprises in the world. Mm-hmm. And so they are defending the status quo. We've seen this before. Prior to the Civil War, you had that. Prior to World War II, we were mentioning earlier a book about the arsenals of democracy and how they brought in the disruptors in 1939, General Marshall in 1939, 1940, in order to disrupt into its entirety how defense was operating. It had to, because we had to win the war. And I think that's what we have to do now. And it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. And I think President Trump is trying to do that in some of the selections that he's bringing in through his cabinet, especially in his deputy and others, and his service secretaries. which are going to look at things totally different than the way things have been looked at in the past.
So I have to ask, sir, I suspect when the disruptors open the defense books and see the bureaucracy as it is, not as we want it to be, it's not a private or commercial company. We know that they would have gone out of business a long time ago. It's a unique bureaucracy. A lot of the dollars go back out the door and purchase goods and services. I expect they're going to come back to you. The first thing they're going to say is, we need more flexible funding. What will your response be to that?
In other words, they don't want any oversight. Yeah, I get it. But the answer to this, if there's an answer, I was back looking at testimony, that's what I do in my spare time. I was reading some testimony from Admiral Rickover in 1977 that he was giving to Congress about how he needed to be given these authorities in order to move forward on submarine technology. Now remember, Rickover was given an order, I think in 1950, to build a nuclear submarine and put a nuclear reactor into a submarine and have it operational. He did it in 3 years. Think about that. He miniaturized a nuclear reactor, put it in a submarine, and had it launched in 3 years, the Nautilus. Could we do that today? That's the difference. Now, they had a little bigger budget, I suspect. But actually, after World War II and the demobilization that took place, that Truman demobilized 10 million people in a year. And Eisenhower declined the defense budget even more, but he focused on certain things. Right. And that's what we have to do. We have to focus on certain things and disrupt the department and to change it radically as quickly as possible. China is a true threat, folks. It's not an imaginary threat. It's a true threat. Xi has made up his mind. He wants Taiwan, and he wants it as soon as possible, either voluntarily by the Taiwanese. I've been there a couple of times, or not voluntarily. So we've got to move very quickly because we can't allow that to happen. And you have an emerging Russia, so it's a real problem. So we got to act quick.
Before we talk continuing resolutions, because it's a favorite subject of ours at AEI, and I know it's your biggest headache, but you're a man after our own heart reading Rickover in your free time, which I think is fantastic. But you mentioned picking priority sets of investments. Select the Eisenhower model again, the second offset, excuse me. The new look. So if I had to guess, I'm going to throw a couple out there, and then you tell me, and then you overlay it with how Ukraine is changing many things in real time. Tell me what you would add or take off the list. Okay, so the triad, which is extremely expensive but necessary, whose modernization is overdue. Munitions across the board, from missiles to bombs to rockets to ammo, I suspect all of the above, to last longer. Drone, counter-drone, EW, I'm going to kind of put those all in the new technology basket, but there's many more. Space, cyber, satellite. What else would you prioritize, or what would you kick off the list, if anything?
Well, all those are important. We can go through each one of them if you want. Triad is extremely expensive. The B-21 we have relatively on track and relatively on budget. The Columbia, which carries 70% of our nuclear deterrence, is not on time or on budget. There's some problems that we're having with the contractor for various reasons, contractors, I should say, but nonetheless, it's behind. We had to put money in the continuing resolution to try to get the workforce back on track. I suspect I'm going to hear from other primes about workforce shortage as far as dollars, so soon. And so, but that's a real problem. Now they're asking for more money. We just gave them $5.5 billion, by the way, and already I read in the newspaper the CEO of Huntington Ingalls is saying he needs another $1.5 billion. He hasn't talked to me yet, but nonetheless, I read about that the other day. But it's important that we keep the Columbia on track because Ohio is not going to last forever, and we need. And the one thing we have a strategic advantage in is that and the Virginia-class submarine, and so we need to keep that on track. On the land-based part of the triad, that's a total mess, and we're going to have to get to the bottom of that. You're right. We did the algorithm, the same one that they ran back in the Eisenhower administration. You know, why do you need a triad? Same reason the Chinese have a triad, the same reason the Russians have a triad, because it's mutually assured destruction, and we don't want to back away from that. And once you give a message that you're going to do that, then that's you put yourself in a vulnerable situation. So we need to get this land-based system straightened out, which is going to be complex. What was the other one you were talking about?
Well, I didn't talk about other shipbuilding, but then space, cyber, satellite, and then EW.
Space is a happy part of this.
We agree.
You know, my friends at Boeing and Lockheed used to come see me back in the United Launch Alliance days and say how much money they were losing, and we got to have these cost plus contracts, and we knew we had to create competition within the system, and we helped this young man at the time. This is back when I was chairing space and aeronautics, and we helped him out on a couple of small CIA launches, and he barely made it. He almost went bankrupt. A lot of people don't know that, and just barely made payroll a couple of times. He put it all on the table. Now, he controls 90% of the launch business in the world, 90% plus. I went down to Brownsville, Texas recently and went to see his Starship, and he was telling me he's going to drop launch costs by another 50%. Now that, the guys that want to compete against him, all of a sudden that sends shivers down their spine. We can't, you can put, the Starship can put 110 tons into low Earth orbit in one launch and be reusable. And he will succeed at that, I have no doubt. He's a very bright guy. He's a little crazy sometimes. Just on tape. But he's very, as an engineer, he's about as smart as he gets. And he's an absolute rocket scientist. So he can figure this out. And what he's doing with Starlink is changing the world. And he's already has, I think, 10,000 satellites up there, and he's going to have his own device. He's going to mesh that with some other technologies he has, and so that's a happy story, and we can piggyback on Starlink and do some other things that I can't talk about. But that's one area that we still have some level of strategic advantage. The other area that we have advantage is artificial intelligence. We're significantly ahead in artificial intelligence. We want to maintain that lead. And we're also ahead in software engineering. You get Alex Karp here from Palantir to talk to you about that. But those are areas that are happily, that are to our advantage. And we can use AI in the cyber world. And there's still some good people over at NSA. We need to reform NSA, but in order to make sure that we maintain that advantage.
Do you think your colleagues recognize that there typically is a small upfront cost to competition? Because I heard it in the Hegseth hearing this morning. I agree with you that it helps bring down costs overall. But I think back to when the House and Senate were voting on the Joint Strike Fighter alternate engine. The second engine was, 70% developed or something. It was only a couple $100 million to get it over the line. And the threat was if you go with a single engine provider and the fleet, there's a problem with the engine, the fleet will be grounded repeatedly, and that's exactly what's happened. It's been grounded dozens of times worldwide. And it was only a couple $100 million for that competition. Is there going to be, will your colleagues be supportive of the upfront cost to pay for competition?
By the way, I've been around long enough. I remember when the F-35 was a PowerPoint demonstration, and I'll never forget going to this demonstration with this two-star, and he was saying, well, this is going to be the Swiss Army knife of fighter jets. We're going to have the Air Force variant, we're going to have the Navy variant, we're going to have the Marine Corps variant, and we're going to bring down our cost of hourly operation because we're going to have this singular, aircraft, and it's going to be fantastic. And it didn't really work out that well. It almost got canceled. A lot of people don't forget the history of this. Those of you who've been around this aerospace industry for a while, Jerry Lewis almost canceled the program. They were having, this is before it got to manufacturing level, and we were still developing the F-22, and you could hear the CEO of Lockheed screaming down the hallway. I mean, we really came close to doing this. And in retrospect, because what he wanted to do was cancel the F-35 and build more F-22s and go right to the 6th-gen aircraft. Go right to, what we call NGAD now, but go right to the 6th-gen aircraft. And in retrospect, probably should have done that. But, we were going to retire the F-15, we're going to retire the F-16, the F-18, the A-10, all of it. And now, we're obviously going to build the F-15X, which we need. Kevin, we need to have F-15X, I get it. And we need more F-35s because we're married to that. We're building the last of the F-18s. That's what the last. I think we got the contract on 8 or something like that. We should have had 12, but nonetheless we got 8. So that's going to be it for that. And so, and we got less air wings than we should have. It's a mess.
So the last question for me.
By the way, the last thing on those engines, by the way, I was always for a multiple buy-on engine. I'm always for competition.
Me too.
Pratt & Whitney was, obviously pushing for that, but we should have had a multiple engine operation on that thing. It would have, we should never, ever be reliant on a single supplier.
Hear, hear. We agree. Last question for me before we turn to the audience. So we have to turn the mirror back on Congress. I know you must hear about this endlessly. Of everyone you're an easy target to beat up on, and that's not why I'm picking on you. But I wonder if your colleagues who don't think about defense all day, appropriators and authorizers, if they really do understand the unique impact of spending freezes, known as continuing resolutions, on the armed forces, because it depends on the year, 40 to 50 some percent of the dollars you give them goes back out the door in contracted goods and services. So when you lock everything down and say, don't go up, don't go down, don't change left and don't change right horizontally, and don't invest in new things, that does unique harm. You can't match the threat. Do you think your colleagues truly get that? Is that why we get CRs, because it's such a good agency to take hostage? And how do you get out from under this?
Yeah, I don't. You're right. We all need to educate them on this. CRs, by the way, the Department of Defense, we lose depends on how you do the arithmetic, but I would say about $1 billion a month to operate on a continuing resolution, just out the door. Because no new starts, inefficiencies within the department, on and on and on and on. So it makes 0 sense to operate on a CR. And we started down this path years ago, getting down these CRs, and we can't get out of that habit. We never used to have CRs. Now we got them every year, and so we got to stop. I'm going to be in a meeting right after this, trying to get a top-line number so we can negotiate these appropriation bills, which is extremely frustrating. And the Senate, I talked to Susan Collins yesterday. She's moving ahead. I mean, she's not going to wait around on us. I don't blame her. And she's like, look, I got to get this done. So it's nuts. Yeah, you all need to educate your members of Congress and tell them that CRs cost money. They don't save money. So.
Amen. I agree. That's the bumper sticker. Okay, we have 4 or 5 minutes. We will open it up to those of you who came out to the audience today. Corey, you're up.
Thank you. I'm Corey Shock. I lead the Florida Defense team here. I'd be interested in how you think about the relative weight of existing infrastructure versus innovation, because there are so many aircraft carriers, there are so many fighter planes. Chris Brose and others have argued to accelerate past existing infrastructure, and the way that you were talking about the F-35 sort of suggested both possibilities and drawbacks of that. How are you thinking about it now, about the trade-off between where we can innovate and make obsolete existing infrastructure in the department?
Well, it's always difficult to retire legacy platforms because the constituencies around them. I remember General Berger came to see me 5 years ago. He was a commandant of the Marine Corps, and said, "Look, I got some radical changes. It's going to seem like radical changes that I'm going to do to the Corps. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the tanks, and I'm going to change the artillery mix and go to long-range fire." And he had this mix of munitions that he was looking at. And we had a couple of adult beverages, and we were talking this over. And he said, "The gray hairs will be after me." And then he looked at me and he said, "Look, this was 5 years ago. In modern warfare, tanks are not survivable. Your friends will tell you in the legacy movement that they are, that there's going to be the way that we defend the troops, how we as a military move, that they're going to be defendable. If you had a son, you wouldn't want your son in one. Because with cluster drones now, which we're going to be able to attach artificial intelligence to, there's no way they can survive." And after what happened in Ukraine, where up to 3,500 Russian tanks have been destroyed, they keep building them, they keep destroying them. The same thing in Ukraine. We sent Abram tanks over there. The Ukrainians immediately pulled them off the front because they were being destroyed as fast as they could put them up there. That's a reality. Now, I know my friends from General Dynamics, there may be some here, don't want to hear that. They're going to say, "We're going to put lasers, we're going to put projected force, we're going to do all this, we're going to defend the tank." But at some point, you've got to face reality. Now, the other reality, this is going to probably, I hope not end up in the front page of some newspaper, but we ought to look at aircraft carriers. My friends that are submarine captains and Virginia-class submarines will say, on the outside, an aircraft carrier will last a week on a pure adversary. Right now, it costs us, by the time we build an aircraft carrier, put its component F-35s and all the electronics and the 5,000 souls that we put on that, we're probably looking at well over $22, $23 billion. Right now, we have, as you know, under the Ford class, we've got the Ford out there. We're going to have the JFK out pretty soon. We have the third aircraft carrier coming online. And these are 50-year decisions. Will an aircraft carrier be survivable in modern warfare when the Chinese right now have 1,200 operational hypersonic missiles that can be clustered and move at Mach 6, Mach 7? And if you shoot 100 of them at an aircraft carrier, will that aircraft carrier survive? And you got to ask that question. And so if they can't, then we have to make some difficult decisions. And I bring that up now because I think we have to talk about this. And we shouldn't, we made a decision to get rid of battleships a long time ago for a good reason. We need to be smaller, mobile, faster, and invisible. This is a new change in modern warfare. But on every single legacy platform, that's the question we have to ask. Is this survivable? Is this a workable program in today's war? If it isn't, we should make a hard decision and move on and move to the technology of today and tomorrow.
Okay. Do you have time, sir, for one more? Okay, last question.
David Smith of The Guardian. What do you think is going to happen in Ukraine? Is Congress willing to provide further security assistance, or do you have confidence in President-elect Trump's claims that he can negotiate a quick solution?
Well, irregardless of President Trump, all wars come to an end sooner or later. I talked to the secretary last night. I think about 1,100,000 casualties at this point. About 700,000 of those are Russians, and about a third of those 700,000 are dead. About 230,000 dead Russians. Think about that. In Eastern Europe, you have a war that has created that level of casualties. The Russians have gotten some territory in the Donbass. They would have liked to get all of Ukraine. I talked to Burns early on in this thing. He told me that they were going to go in and take out Ukraine relatively quickly and go into Kyiv and eliminate the senior leadership of Ukraine, and then immediately take Moldova and then gear up and take the Balkans. They didn't think that we'd go to war over the Balkans at the time. And that was Putin's mindset. Now, I think, his intelligence operative that told him all that is no longer on the planet. And a lot of the people who put him in this, I'm sure that Putin wishes he never did this. But he's in it now, and his ego's in it. And so how do we get out of this? Ukraine's not going to get Crimea back. I think there's some negotiation that has to take place in the Donbass. I think General Kendall, is going to be involved in that, as some other people. But all wars end, and this war needs to end. I don't want to see Russia prevail any more than you do, or anyone else. But we've got to find an acceptable solution at this point. This is generational to Ukraine and Russia. The casualty numbers in Ukraine are such on the front that a significant number of the people that injured die on the field because they can't use the tourniquets. They don't have health care down there. They're dying in the hospitals. And those who are injured, they don't have a VA like we do. The suicide rate is off the charts. Same thing in Russia, by the way. This is going to be generational to them. These are injuries that are arms, legs, brain injuries. Who would have thought we would have been using a 155 artillery, and we have a shortage of 155 artillery rounds? Nobody. And that's the kind of war that's being operated in Europe right now. So I'm hopeful that we can come to a satisfactory solution to this. The problem is going to be is the Ukrainians are just going to put this away neatly. There will be an insurgency, I have no doubt, and Russia's going to have to deal with that. So they created this monster. So I think there'll be a significant end to the war, I think within 6 months, but the insurgency is not going to go away. And everybody's got a gun, everybody's got landmines, everybody's got some kind of a weapon, and so that's going to be a problem for a long, long time. So no neat solutions here. I wish there was, but there isn't.
To that, or our defense spending challenges, Mr. Chairman, you were short but extremely impactful. Thank you for giving us a half hour of your time.
Great, thank you. Good to see you all. Yeah. Okay.